I was 15 when it happened. My sister was 5. It started on her 5th birthday, when she received one of those dolls that's supposed to look like the owner. It was a standard doll, the same height as my sister, red hair, freckles. It even came with an outfit matching its own for my sister. The only out of the ordinary part were its eyes. My sister had very strange eyes, blue with flecks of brown near the pupil. I used to tease her they looked like toilet bowls with poop floating in them. I'd never seen another person with eyes like this, but the dolls matched them perfectly. I don't recall who gave her the doll, but I thought whoever it was had taken the time to repaint the eyes as a special touch. After she opened gifts, my sister and her friends began running around, dressing up, the usual little kid stuff. I, not wanting to get stuck babysitting, snuck off to my room and shut the door. I was immersed in a scary story I was reading, when I heard the door creak open. Naturally, and considering what I was reading, I flipped my shit and turned around as fast as I could. Sitting nudged between the mostly shut door and the frame was my sister's doll. Had there not been a gang of little kids in my house, I might have gotten a bit scared, but I was sure one, or all, of them had placed it there as a prank. I brought the doll back downstairs and that was the last I heard of it for a few months, save for my sister's stories and packing it around with her constantly. 2 months later, things got weird. My sister ran downstairs one day screaming that her doll was being mean to her. Knowing it was just her imagination, but no wanting to upset her, I firmly reprimanded the doll in front of her, then put it on the top shelf of my sister's closet. She seemed satisfied that justice had been served, and I was a bit glad not to see that thing around anymore. It was a bit creepy how much it looked like my sister. I thought of the times I'd seen her asleep with it, and wondered if I could even tell the difference in the dark. But that was beside the point, because without my or my parents' help the doll would be trapped in the closet, and I certainly wouldn't be taking it down. Later that night, I heard my sister screaming. I ran into the room to see the doll at the foot of her bed. It wasn't even leaning on something, just standing there, staring at her. I grabbed the doll and bolted down the stairs. My parents came out to see me going down and asked what was going on, but I didn't stop to explain. I stuffed the doll in our trash can, the blue and brown eyes stared up at you, almost in an angry way. When I went back inside my sister was back asleep, having been calmed down by my parents, and I was glad to be done with the ordeal. Or so I thought. The next morning as I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, I saw my sister at my door. I blinked at my blurry morning sight, and when I opened my eyes again she was gone. I walked to her room only to see her sound asleep. Odd, I thought. It must have been a trick of the eye. But later that night it happened again. I was awoken by footsteps and saw what I thought was my sister standing just outside my door. I turned to switch the light on, only to see there was no one there. Once again she was fast asleep in her room when I checked. The garbage hadn't yet been picked up, so I decided to check the bin tomorrow morning. Maybe my dad was playing tricks on me. The next morning, as I suspected, the trash was empty. While we ate breakfast I confronted my dad. "Dad, did you put Jane's doll outside my room last night or this morning?" I asked. "What? Don't be stupid, that doll's out in the trash where you left it." "No, I checked, it wasn't there." "Well, maybe some kids saw it and wanted it for themselves. How should I know where the damn thing went?" That was the end of the matter. Strange, but I shrugged it off. God, I regret that. That night my sister was scared, so I agreed to stay in her room. All night we heard terrible things. Whispers and laughs I swear were in my sister's voice, footsteps above and around us, we were petrified. But soon enough the noises stopped and sleep outweighed fear. I dreamed of the doll, sneaking into the room with us. But in my dream, it occurred to me that ripping the doll's head off would stop it. To this day I don't know where I got that thought, but I wish I hadn't. I awoke to see the doll lying next to my sister in her bed, but I thought I knew what I needed to do. I grabbed the doll in the dark and held it down. I remember it felt heavier than I remembered. I grabbed hold of the hair, so lifelike, and pulled as hard as I could. I looked into the doll's eyes. I had to pull harder than I thought to get the head off the doll, and it looked as if there were fear in its eyes. Finally there was a sickening rip, and the head popped off. I smiled, only then realizing how tired I was. I laid down, kicking the head and body away so I could sleep. I woke to the sound of screaming. My mother was hysterical. I saw her run into the room, her face covered in tears. I looked around me. I was surrounded by blood. It was on the floor and on my hands. My mother continued to shriek as she held the doll's head close to her chest. Why was she so upset? I'd saved us. Where was all this blood coming from? I looked around, and lying in my sister's bed, I saw the doll. It was about midnight when I finally passed out. I had been working my ass off on writing an article about some mental patient saying his dreams are becoming real. Crazy bastard. Either way, I needed sleep. I did my regular nightly routine. I brushed my teeth, changed into an old t-shirt and boxers, crawled under the covers, and fell asleep listening to the sound of the city streets. All was well, or so I thought. At around 3 I was awoken to an odd sound. It sounded like something was dripping out onto the carpet in the living room. Typical shitty hotel plumbing, though. I got out of the bed to assess the problem. It was pitch dark, so I hit the lights. It immediately seemed like I was on the surface of the sun. I instinctively closed my eyes and reached out for something. I reached out and grabbed what seemed to be someone's shoulder. My eyes burst open to see a pale, grinning face with the word "smile" carved grimily on its forehead, with a mixture of saliva and blood coming out of a gaping mouth full of long, dirty, sharp teeth. "Fuck!" I shouted. I was about to run away when the thing grabbed my arm. I was paralyzed. I felt its cold grip engulf my entire body. "Going somewhere," it said in a two-toned, demonic voice. That's when I snapped out of my trance. I broke away from its grip and began running. I made it through my hotel door all right, but as I neared the front door, I felt an intense pain run down my back. I looked over my shoulder to see the thing's nails covered in fresh blood. My fresh blood. This didn't stop me though. I kept running toward the door. I ran outside into the loud, busy streets of New York. I started screaming for help, but it seemed like no one was looking at me. No one even seemed to recognize I was there. As I was begging and screaming for help, I felt the thing grab me again. He spun me around and plunged his nails into my stomach. I fell. The last thing I saw was the thing laughing hysterically at my dying. As I fell into an abyss of darkness, my eyes suddenly burst open. I was in a hospital bed. It was morning. I could hear a heart monitor beeping along with my pulse. I was alive. It was all a dream. A twisted, twisted dream. The doctor was standing there when I woke up. "Oh, good, you're awake," he said. Where the hell am I?" "You're in Bellevue Hospital. We found you running around outside of your hotel screaming for help. Someone called the police and they took you here. We thought you were on drugs at first, but we ran a test. You seem to be clean. We figure you must have had some very vivid nightmare and began sleepwalking." At first I was confused, but then remembering the dream, it all made sense. "Oh, well, that's a relief," I said. "Quite indeed, you seem to be having an extremely terrifying nightmare. Either way, you safe now. If you need anything just call and the nurse will be right with you. The doctor was getting ready to leave, but then I found something strange about this whole thing. Wait, if I was just sleepwalking, then why the hell am I in a hospital? I asked. Oh yes, when the police found you, you were passed out. They thought you had overdosed. But when they picked you up, they saw blood along your back and stomach. Somehow you managed to get 3 cuts all the way down your back and a deep puncture into your stomach. Don't worry though, we stitched you up and you should be out of bed in no time. Anything else I can answer? I was speechless. The doctor left. Everything went silent it seemed like, except for the patient next door to me. He seemed to be laughing hysterically. In the late 1800s, Thomas Otto and his family moved into a mansion at the corner of Eaton and Simonton Streets in Key West, Florida, now known as the Artist House. The Ottos were known to be stern with their servants, sometimes even mistreating them. It was the treatment of one such Haitian servant that provides a twist in this story. This woman was hired to take care of their son, Robert. One day, Mrs. Otto supposedly witnessed her practicing black magic in their backyard and fired her. Before she left, the woman gave Robert a lifelike doll which stood 3 feet tall, had buttons for eyes, human hair, believed to be Robert's, and was filled with straw. Dolls that resembled children were not unheard of during this time, but this one proved to be special. Robert named the doll after himself and often dressed it in his clothes. Robert, the doll, became his trustworthy companion. He took it with him on shopping trips into town. The doll had a seat at the dinner table where Robert would sneak it bites of food when his parents weren't looking. Robert would even be tucked into bed with the boy at night. Soon this innocent relationship took on a strange nature. Soon after, Robert chose to be referred to by his middle name, Jean, after being scolded by his mother. He told her that Robert was the doll's name, not his. Jean was often heard in his toy room having conversations with Robert. Jean would say something in his childish manner and responses could be heard in a much lower voice. Sometimes Jean would become very agitated, worrying the servants and his mother. She would, on occasion, burst in to find her son cowering in a corner while Robert sat perched in a chair or on the bed glaring at him. This was only the beginning. Household objects would be found thrown across the room, Jean's toys turned up mutilated, and giggling could be heard. Whenever these unusual acts took place, Jean always said, "Robert did it." The boy took the punishment but always insisted that the blame was Robert's. As the mischief grew, more and more servants took their leave as new ones were hired. The Otto's relatives felt it was time to do something. With the recommendation of a great aunt, Jean's parents removed Robert from his care and placed him in a box in the attic. This is where he resided for many years. After the death of his father, Jean was willed his boyhood home. He decided to live in the Victorian mansion with his new wife. Jean had become an artist, and felt the house was spacious and would provide a place for him to paint. He went to the attic and dusted off his childhood toy. He became attached to the doll despite his wife's displeasure. Jean would take the doll along with them everywhere they went. He even sat in his favorite little chair while Jean and his wife slept nearby. The turret room became Robert's domain after Mrs. Otto moved him back to the attic. Their marriage slowly became sour until Mrs. Otto supposedly went insane and died of unknown reasons. Jean followed soon behind. Robert supposedly attacked people, sometimes locking them in the attic. People who passed by claimed to hear evil laughter coming from the turret room. For some time, Robert remained in the empty house by himself until a new family purchased the mansion and restored it. The doll was once again moved to the attic. This pleased it as much as the last time. The doll was often found throughout the house. On one certain night, Robert was found at the foot of the owner's bed giggling with a kitchen knife in hand. This was enough to send them fleeing from the home. Robert was later moved to the East Martello Museum in Key West, where he sits perched in a glass box. Despite his new living quarters, the doll is believed to not have given up his menacing ways. Visitors and employees claim they have seen the doll move. His smile has been known to turn into a scowl. One employee cleaned Robert, turned off all the lights and left for the night. The next day, he returned to find lights turned on, Robert sitting in a different position than the night before and a fresh layer of dust on his shoes. Some say he'll even curse you. If you want to take a picture of him, you must ask politely. He'll tilt his head in permission. However, if he doesn't and you take the picture anyways, a curse will befall upon you and anyone who accompanied you to the museum. The same will happen if you make fun of him. To this day, Robert remains at the East Martello Museum in his sailor suit clutching his stuffed lion, continuing his menacing ways.